Hey guys, tonight we are taking a slow, meandering stroll through the history of one of the most common, most overlooked pieces of urban furniture ever invented, the humble streetlight. You're probably lying in bed right now, the glow of your phone the only light in the room. But I want you to imagine for a moment that this little rectangle of light in your hand isn't here. In fact, I want you to imagine that no electric light exists anywhere outside your window. The world beyond your door is a pool of absolute, ink-black darkness, and you have to walk home through it. You probably wouldn't survive this, not without a lantern, a stout club, and a serious dose of luck, because for the vast majority of human history, the night was a genuinely terrifying and dangerous place, a separate world ruled by accident, crime, and superstition. It's a world we've completely engineered away with a flip of a switch, and its story begins not with a brilliant flash of Edison's bulb, but with the sputtering smoky flame of a simple oil lamp 2,000 years ago. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling chatty, drop a comment down below telling me where you're listening from and what the local time is. I always find it fascinating to picture you all scattered across the globe, all winding down together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself not in your bed, but on the cobbled stones of a wide, imperial road. The air is different here, thick with the smell of wood smoke, baking bread from a late-night bakery, and something else, something acrid and oily. It's the smell of a civilization trying its hardest to push back the night. You're in Rome, sometime around 300 AD, and the sun has just dipped below the 7 hills. Shadows stretch, grow long, and then merge into one consuming darkness. But it's not complete. Here and there, a faint, orange glow pushes back. You walk towards one. It's a simple terracotta pot, filled with olive oil, with a flax wick floating in it, perched on a bracket outside the door of a somewhat wealthy homeowner. This is a lumen. This isn't a public service. It's a private necessity, a feeble attempt to mark a doorway to warn a drunk cart driver away from your walls, to provide just enough light for a night watchman to see a potential thief. The light it casts is pathetic, really. A modern nightlight plugged into your bathroom outlet would utterly shame this flickering, smoky little flame. It dances and gutters in the slightest breeze, casting more confusing, moving shadows than it does useful illumination. You can see why most Romans, even the tough, battle-hardened legionaries, simply did not go out after dark unless it was absolutely necessary. The city's famous aqueducts brought fresh water. Its roads connected an empire, but its streets at night were a chaotic maze of tripping hazards, dark alleyways, and criminal opportunity. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these early lights was for safety, for commerce, or simply as a status symbol, a way for a wealthy Roman to show he could afford to burn expensive oil through the night. And it wasn't just Rome. On the other side of the world, in the magnificent Han Dynasty capital of Chang'an, a similar battle was being waged. The Chinese, master innovators, were using not just oil, but natural gas, captured from seeps in the ground and piped through hollow bamboo tubes to where it could be burned. Imagine that, a faint, hissing blue flame lighting a street corner in an ancient city while Europe was still centuries away from such a concept. But the fuel was inconsistent, the technology rudimentary. The night remained the victor. The most common light source for the average person, whether in Rome or Chang'an, was a simple torch, a bundle of sticks soaked in resin or tar. It burned brighter, yes, but it was also a mobile fire hazard, dripping hot, sticky embers on the person carrying it and on the dry, wooden buildings they walked past. The history of urban lighting is, for its first 1,000 years, also a history of catastrophic urban fires. Now for the quirky tidbit. The kind of detail that makes you remember these weren't just statues in a history book, but real people with real, often bizarre, problems. What did you use for a wick if you weren't near a flax field? You got creative, deeply, disturbingly creative. There are records from various cultures of using dried rushes, of twisting together strips of cloth, and in some particularly desperate or experimental circumstances, of using dried animal dung. Yes, you are now picturing a Roman carefully lighting a lamp wick made of, let's just say, processed herbivore leftovers. The smell must have been distinctive, a blend of burning olive oil and scorched manure, the signature scent of ancient urban nightlife. It's a far cry from the sterile, silent white glow of lead that we know today. It was organic, messy, and utterly feeble, but it was a start. It was the first conscious, widespread attempt to draw a line in the sand and tell the encroaching darkness that humanity would not go quietly. That tiny, stinking, sputtering flame was a declaration of war. A war we are still fighting tonight on every street corner in the world. And the battles were about to get stranger, and a lot more mandatory. The memory of that smoky Roman lumen fades as you find yourself transported centuries forward. The Mediterranean air replaced by a thick, choking dampness that clings to your clothes and settles deep in your lungs. The year is now 1334, and you are in London, a city that makes ancient Rome seem like a well-planned, hygienic paradise. The cobblestones under your feet are slick with a mixture of mud and things you'd rather not identify. The sounds are different here: the clatter of wooden clogs, the grunting of pigs rooting through refuse in the street, the distant cry of the gardyloo from an upper window, a warning to get out of the way before the contents of a chamber pot are tossed into the night. And it is dark, impossibly, suffocatingly dark, the kind of dark that feels like a physical weight, a velvet cloak smothering the narrow, twisting lanes between overhanging timber-framed buildings. You can't see your own hand in front of your face. This is the world before any real concept of public lighting, and it is a world where simply walking home is the day's greatest gamble. But then, a new sound joins the nocturnal orchestra. It's not a pleasant sound, it's the sharp, official rap of a staff on a door, followed by a shouted decree. You're witnessing the birth of forced civic responsibility, the first real, shaky step toward a publicly lit city. King Edward III is on the throne, and he's had enough of his subjects stumbling around, committing crimes, and generally making a mess of his capital in the dark. His solution isn't to build lanterns himself. That would cost money, but to force his people to do it. The proclamation echoes down the grimy lane. Every single householder, from the wealthy merchant to the struggling baker, must now hang a lantern outside their front door between the hours of dusk and curfew. This is the lantern law, and it's as much about control as it is about illumination. The night watchmen, armed with their staffs and their limited patience, now have a much easier job. Anyone moving through the streets is instantly visible in the small pool of light from each doorway. If you're out after curfew without a good reason, you're not just lurking in shadows, you're a clear target. The light these mandated lanterns provide is, once again, pathetic. They're simple candle lanterns. Often just a piece of horn scraped thin enough to be translucent. Glass is far too expensive for such common use. Protecting a tallow candle. Tallow, for the uninitiated, is rendered animal fat. It smells, frankly, like roasting death when it burns, a greasy, acrid odor that mixes with the ever-present stench of the city. The light it casts is a weak, yellowish-brown, flickering and desperate. But multiply that feeble glow by a few thousand houses across London, and for the first time, a major city has a consistent, if woefully inadequate, network of light. It doesn't light the streets themselves, it just creates a dotted line of doorways, a constellation of dim stars guiding the way, making the overwhelming dark just barely navigable. Now, cross the channel with me, to Paris. A few centuries later, the City of Light wasn't always living up to its name. By the early 16th century, the problem of nocturnal lawlessness had gotten so bad that the good citizens were, quite literally, tripping over bodies in the streets. The solution, much like in London, was a top-down order. In 1524, the Parisian Parliament decreed that a lantern must be hung in every street-facing window and that residents must keep them burning until dawn. This was a step up from London's door lanterns, creating a wall of light, however faint. But the real innovation, the quirky tidbit that makes you appreciate modern bureaucracy, was the tax. To pay for a small corps of men to actually light and maintain some public lanterns, the city fathers implemented a tax. But not just any tax. This was a tax on chickens. Yes, the chicken tax was, for a time, what funded the flickering public lights of Paris. Imagine that every plucked bird sold at market, contributing a few sous to the fight against darkness. It's a wonderfully absurd connection. The humble barnyard fowl playing a pivotal role in urban planning. Historians still argue whether these early lighting laws were truly about public safety, or were primarily tools for social control, making it easier for the authorities to monitor movement, enforce curfews, and identify troublemakers. The light exposed the citizen to the watchman as much as it exposed the cobblestones to the citizen. But regardless of the motive, the effect was the same, a slow, collective chipping away at the absolute power of night. The darkness was no longer a given. It was a condition to be managed, a problem to be solved by royal decree, and, apparently, a tax on poultry. The world was inching, candle flicker by candle flicker, toward an idea so radical it was almost unthinkable, that a city had a responsibility to light itself, to create a safe, navigable, and continuous public space that existed not just from sunup to sundown, but all the way through until the next morning. The private flame of the Roman homeowner was becoming a public expectation, and soon, it would become a public utility. But first, we needed a better way to burn things. We needed to go to sea, and to hunt a giant. That faint, greasy smell of tallow from London's mandated lanterns is still clinging to your senses, a pathetic testament to humanity's struggle against the gloom. For centuries, this was the best we could do. Burn leftover animal fat and hope the wind didn't blow it out. It was a losing battle. But then, a new scent arrives on the breeze, carried from the bustling wharves of a growing colonial port. It's a clean, almost sweet odor, a world away from the acrid stench of tallow. This is the smell of progress, of money, and of unimaginable slaughter. This is the smell of whale oil, and for a brief, brilliant, and bloody period, it is the smell of the night itself. You're no longer in a cramped European lane. You're on the deck of a ship, the timbers groaning under your feet, the air a biting cold mix of salt spray and fear. It's the 18th century, the so-called Age of Enlightenment. But out here in the vast, black expanse of the Atlantic, enlightenment is a luxury. Survival is the goal. You are a whaler. The ship you're on is a floating factory dedicated to a single, monstrous purpose, hunting the giants of the deep for the precious oil that lights the lamps of London, Paris, and the brand new streetlights of American cities like Boston and New York. The work is beyond brutal. It's a symphony of violence, patience, and luck. Days, sometimes weeks, are spent in the mind-numbing boredom of scanning an empty horizon, followed by minutes of pure, adrenaline-fueled terror when a spout is sighted. The quarry is the sperm whale, the largest toothed predator on Earth, a creature of profound intelligence and immense power, capable of smashing a wooden longboat to splinters with a flick of its tail. Men in small, exposed boats row desperately towards it, then hurl hand-thrown harpoons, not to kill, but to attach floats and wear the beast down. It's a battle of attrition against a terrified, wounded titan. The final act, the coup de grace, is delivered with a killing lance, aiming for the vital organs. Then, the real work begins. The massive corpse is towed back to the ship and lashed alongside. The deck transforms into a charnel house. Men with long, sharp flensing knives carve strips of blubber from the carcass in a process that turns the sea red. This blubber is then rendered in giant, hellish tripods set over fires on the deck, boiling it down into the clear, high-quality oil that will be barreled and shipped back to civilization. This oil, particularly sperm whale oil, was a revelation. It burned brighter and cleaner than anything that had come before it. It didn't smoke excessively or smell like a cooking tragedy. For the first time, street lamps, real, dedicated public street lamps, not just lanterns hung outside a door, could provide a useful, steady light. The whaling industry didn't just light streets, it lit the interiors of the homes of the wealthy, the factories where the Industrial Revolution was brewing, and the lighthouses that guided other ships safely to shore. It was the petroleum of its day, the engine of nocturnal economy. The quirky, almost surreal tidbit in this grim tale is the substance that made sperm whale oil so superior: spermaceti. This is a waxy, liquid substance found in the unique case in the whale's massive head. It was even better than the blubber oil, burning with a brilliant, unwavering white light that became the gold standard. Spermaceti candles were the ultimate luxury, the 18th century equivalent of installing a high-end smart lighting system today. Your social status was literally illuminated by the quality of whale product you could afford to burn. Historians still argue whether the driving force behind the whaling industry's explosion was purely economic demand for a superior product, or if it was also fueled by a kind of manifest destiny, a desire to conquer and commodify even the most fearsome elements of the natural world. Was it about light? Or was it about proving we could harness the Leviathan itself? The cost, of course, was astronomical, and not just in monetary terms. The environmental and ethical cost was a nightmare. Whale populations were decimated with efficiency that seems shocking today. The industry was also a human meat grinder. Life on a whaling ship was a lottery with terrible odds: death by drowning, by a whale's wrath, by infection from a minor cut, or by the sheer, back-breaking labor was the expectation, not the exception. The gentle, clean light gracing of fashionable London Square was paid for in blood and agony on the high seas. It was an unsustainable, grotesque equation. The world was getting brighter, but the true price of that light was hidden far out of sight, in the rolling, dark waves of the ocean. This couldn't last. The whales were running out, and the cities were growing hungrier for light. We needed a new miracle, a way to conjure light not from the rendered fat of a monster, but from the very air we walked through. The answer, surprisingly, wouldn't come from the sea, but from the earth, and it would arrive in a terrifying, spectacular burst of flame that would make people believe they were witnessing magic. The memory of the whale ship's grisly deck, the coppery smell of blood and boiling blubber, is still vivid. That industry, for all its brutal efficiency, could never keep up. The cities were expanding too fast, their appetite for light becoming insatiable. The world needed a new kind of fire, one that didn't rely on the slaughter of ocean giants or the rendering of slaughterhouse scraps. It needed a fire that could be piped, controlled, and summoned on demand. It needed a public utility, and so, you find yourself transported again, to a specific evening in 1807. The place is Pall Mall in London, and the air is thick with a mixture of coal smoke, fog, and palpable disbelief. You are standing among a crowd of Londoners, their faces upturned, not in prayer, but in sheer, unadulterated awe and terror. For the first time in human history, a street is being lit by gas. The man behind this spectacle is a German entrepreneur named Frederick Albert Windsor, a showman as much as an engineer. He's not the inventor. That credit arguably goes to William Murdoch, a Scot who was quietly lighting his own house with gas years earlier. But Windsor is the visionary, who understood that to sell this revolution, you had to make it a spectacle, and a spectacle it is. The light isn't a warm, familiar flicker. It's a hard, hissing, jet-white flame erupting from a glass globe perched atop a wrought iron post. It's unnervingly steady, unaffected by the wind that whips through the street. It's loud. It casts stark, dramatic shadows that make familiar buildings look alien and menacing. To a population whose entire understanding of light was based on the gentle, living dance of a flame, this is nothing short of sorcery. It is industrial light, and it is terrifying. Rumors fly through the crowd faster than the gas through the pipes beneath their feet. People whisper that the light itself is poisonous, that breathing the air near these newfangled lamps will stop your heart or calcify your lungs. They say the light is so powerful it can blind you, if you look directly at it, that it will bleach the color from clothes and rot the timber of buildings. Newspapers print letters from concerned citizens, doctors even, warning of the pernicious vapors and the certain decline of public health. Your modern mind scoffs, but put yourself in their buckled shoes for a moment. For your entire life, and for all of your ancestors' lives, light was a contained, finite thing, a candle, a lamp, a fire. It was a resource you poured from a jug and lit with a spark. This was different. This was light as a force, tapped from the earth itself, distilled from coal and stinking, infernal retorts, and then pumped through a hidden network of pipes to erupt wherever a company decided to put a valve. It was utterly, fundamentally unnatural. The quirky tidbit in this story of fear and progress involves the very substance itself. What do you call this mysterious new power? Gas was a term coined by the Flemish chemist Jan Baptist van Helmont, deriving it from the Greek word chaos. Think about that. They literally named the new wonder fuel after the primordial void of disorder and formlessness. It's no wonder people were suspicious. They were being asked to embrace chaos light, piped directly into their civilized streets. The early gaslights were also notoriously leaky and inefficient. The process of carbonizing coal in heated retorts produced the gas, but it also produced a host of vile byproducts, coal tar, ammonia, and sulfur compounds that seeped into the soil and water around the gasworks, creating toxic wastelands. The light of the modern city came with its own special kind of pollution, a hidden cost buried just out of sight. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for the adoption of gas lighting was the undeniable superiority of the light it produced, or the massive economic opportunity it presented. For industrialists who could now sell a product light directly to municipalities and homeowners on a continuous basis, it was the birth of the subscription service model. But for illumination, was it about public safety and the extension of the working day, or was it about locking cities into a new, incredibly profitable infrastructure? The debate rages, much like those first hissing flames. But despite the fear, despite the protests and the newspaper editorials, the future was written in that hard, white light. The gaslight craze had begun. It was cleaner than tallow, more reliable than whale oil, and infinitely more scalable than anything before it. The night, for so long a private, fearful space, was about to become a public showroom, and it would require a new kind of public servant to manage it, a figure of romance and soot, of punctuality and poetry, the lamplighter. That hissing, spectral glow of the first gaslights on Pall Mall was just the opening act. The spectacle was installed, the pipes were laid. But a city doesn't light itself. The miracle of on-demand flame required a human touch, a daily ritual as precise as clockwork to bridge the gap between the Industrial Revolution, happening underground, and the darkening sky above. And so, as the gaslight craze swept through the 19th century, a new urban architect was born, a figure who would become as synonymous with the evening as the setting sun itself. You are no longer a spectator in the crowd. You are now following a different figure, his shadow long and distorted in the fading twilight. You are following the lamplighter. His day doesn't begin at dusk. It begins in the afternoon at the gasworks, a place that smells of coal dust, hot iron, and that distinct, sulfury scent of manufactured gas. He collects his lighting pole, a long, slender rod with a hooked end and a pilot light, a small, perpetual flame burning within a protective cage. This is his tool, his scepter. As the sun begins its descent, painting the sky in oranges and purples, he starts his route. There's a rhythm to his work, a cadence that every city dweller internalizes. You hear the steady, unhurried clip of his boots on the cobblestones first. Then, the soft clink as he hooks the pole onto the valve of a lamp post. A quick, practiced pull to open the gas cock, followed by the faint whoosh as the pilot light ignites the mantle within the glass globe. A soft, warm glow blooms into existence, pushing back the gathering shadows around that single post. He moves on, and the process repeats. Clip, clink, whoosh, bloom. Clip, clink, whoosh, bloom. He is a composer, and light is his symphony, one note at a time. He is a figure of strange contradictions. To the romantic poets and the nostalgic painters, he is a wistful symbol of comfort and safety, a beacon in the urban wilderness. Charles Dickens famously wrote of the lamplighter as a good-natured genius who takes his stand beneath his little universe of light, and seems to say, "See how I am lighting you up. I am a public benefactor." Children might run after him, watching his magic act with wide-eyed wonder. But the reality of his job is far from poetic. It is relentless. Rain, snow, or blistering heat, the lamps must be lit. His hands are calloused and often burned. The soot from the gas mantles coats his lungs and stains his clothing. His is a life lived in the liminal hours, in the half-light. And he is often half seeing himself a ghost in his own city, only truly noticed when he is late. And here is the quirky, less than glamorous tidbit. The profession came with its own bizarre set of occupational hazards. Beyond soot inhalation, a lamplighter's greatest fear wasn't the dark, it was rats and wasps. The warm, enclosed space of a glass lamp globe was a prime target for wasps building nests, which would then become a furious, stinging cloud when disturbed by the lighting pole. Worse were the rats. They would climb the iron posts, gnaw through the lead piping that fed the gas, and then nest inside the hollow post itself. A lamplighter reaching up to hook his pole could suddenly find himself the recipient of a very startled and very angry rat leaping straight at his face. His job was a daily exercise in not just illuminating the night, but also in urban pest control. Historians still argue whether the lamplighter was a respected municipal servant or a disrespected, low-wage laborer, seen as little more than a necessary part of the city's machinery. His pay was meager, his social status low, yet he held a peculiar power. The daily rhythm of the city literally depended on him. Factories, pubs, and theaters all scheduled their evenings around the predictable arrival of light. A lazy or drunken lamplighter could plunge an entire neighborhood into premature darkness, causing a spike in accidents and crime. His punctuality was a form of social contract. He was the human metronome of the industrial age, the one who officially ended the day and began the night. But his time, like the gaslight he tended, was finite. A new, even brighter, and far more impersonal light was gathering on the horizon. It wouldn't need a pilot light or a hooked pole. It would crackle to life with a blinding, instantaneous flash. A light so fierce and alien it would make the gentle hiss of gas seem as primitive as a campfire. The age of the lamplighter was destined to be a beautiful, but brief, interlude. The rhythmic clip, clink, whoosh, bloom of the lamplighter's evening ritual was the sound of order, of a predictable and managed night. But that order was about to be shattered by a sound no one had ever heard before, a violent, sputtering crackle hiss, followed by a light so brutally intense it didn't just push back the darkness, it vaporized it. You are standing in a public square, perhaps in Paris or London, sometime in the late 1870s. The familiar, warm glow of the gas lamps suddenly looks pathetic, jaundiced, and ancient, because in the center of the square, mounted on a towering pole, is something new. It's called an arc light. and it doesn't illuminate the street, it attacks it. This is the electric spark, the first terrifying incarnation of electric light. And it is nothing like the gentle incandescent bulb you know. It's based on a simple, savage principle. Run enough current through two rods of carbon until the gap between them becomes white-hot plasma. The result is a miniature sun. It's a light so piercingly white and blue it hurts to look at directly. It casts shadows so sharp they look like they've been cut from black paper with a knife. It throws every cobblestone, every brick, every wrinkle on a face into stark, unforgiving relief. There are no soft edges here, no gentle gradients from light to dark. This is binary light, on or off. This was the first skirmish in the War of the Currents, and its soldiers were these blinding, hissing beacons. The first public demonstration of this terrifying new power was arguably in 1841 at the Paris Opera, where arc lights were used not for practicality, but for pure, jaw-dropping spectacle. Imagine being an audience member, used to the warm, flickering glow of gaslight chandeliers. Suddenly, a light unlike anything conceived by nature or man erupts from the stage. It must have felt less like a technological demonstration and more like a religious event, a glimpse into the divine, or the infernal. These early systems were monstrously impractical. They were powered by massive, sputtering arrays of batteries or shrieking steam-driven dynamos that had to be housed in a separate building. The carbon rods burned away quickly, requiring a constant, fussy adjustment mechanism, a clockwork feeder that would often jam, causing the light to sputter and die or, worse, flare up and burn out in a shower of sparks. They were the divas of the lighting world, brilliant, temperamental, and high maintenance. And the quirky, almost comical tidbit of this era? The effect this new, harsh light had on the natural world. When a series of arc lights were installed in a public park or zoo, the animal inhabitants were utterly bewildered. Nocturnal animals, whose entire existence was predicated on the sun going down, simply stopped. They'd freeze in place, confused by this artificial noon that had arrived at midnight. Diurnal animals, birds especially, would be roused from sleep and begin chirping, convinced dawn had come early. The arc light didn't just disrupt human society, it scrambled the circadian rhythms of an entire urban ecosystem. People, too, found the light disorienting. It was too good at its job. It eliminated every shadow, which meant it also eliminated every hiding place. The gentle, forgiving gloom of the gaslight era, where a blush could be hidden and a stumble go unnoticed, was replaced by a harsh, interrogational glare. Crime didn't necessarily disappear under these lights. It just moved to the next dark street over. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these early, dazzling arc light installations was genuine public utility or simply corporate theatrics, a way for fledgling electrical companies like Thomas Edison's or George Westinghouse's to showcase the raw, terrifying power of their new product and attract investors. Was it about lighting streets, or was it about winning the psychological battle for the future? The light was so overwhelming that it felt like propaganda. It was a statement: the future will be bright, whether you like it or not. But for all its power, the arc light was a dead end. For street lighting, it was too bright, too expensive, too centralized. You couldn't have one of these shrieking miniature suns on every corner. The future of electric light wouldn't be found in the violent arc between two carbon rods, but in a much quieter, simpler, and more elegant invention happening behind closed doors. It would be found in a tiny, glass-encased filament, glowing with a warm, familiar light that promised to bring the sun itself into your home, without the apocalyptic fanfare. The memory of those hissing, sputtering suns in the public square is still scorched into your mind, a vision of a future too bright, too violent for everyday life. The arc light was a spectacular proof of concept, a demonstration that electricity could make light. But it was a caveman's club, not a sculptor's tool. The world didn't need a dozen miniature suns. It needed 1,000,000 tiny, controllable stars. It needed a light you could live with, a light that felt, well, natural. And so, the story of street lighting turns away from the public spectacle and moves indoors, into the cluttered, frantic, and fiercely competitive world of the inventor's workshop. The War of the Currents was being fought over how to deliver power, but a quieter, just as bitter war was being waged over what to do with it once it arrived. This is the incandescent revolution, and its story is not one of lone genius, but of parallel discovery, ruthless business, and the race to own a piece of the night. You are no longer in a city square. You are in a laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey. In the late 1870s, the air smells of ozone, hot metal, and burnt paper. Thomas Edison, a man less a pristine genius and more a force of relentless, commercialized iteration, is surrounded by a team of muckers, all testing, failing, and testing again. The goal is simple in theory. Run electricity through a high-resistance filament inside a glass vacuum bulb until it glows white-hot without immediately burning up. The execution is a nightmare of frustration. They try everything: carbonized cardboard, platinum, even a hair from a colleague's beard. Each material flames out, literally, in seconds. The vacuum pumps are imperfect, leaving just enough oxygen inside the bulb to ensure the filament's swift suicide. This isn't a story of a single eureka moment. It's the sound of 1,000 light bulbs shattering across the Atlantic. In England, a man named Joseph Swan is on the exact same quest, and he's arguably further along. Swan, a more methodical and less flamboyant character, demonstrates a working incandescent lamp to a scientific audience in 1878, a full year before Edison's famous breakthrough. His design uses a carbonized paper filament in a partial vacuum. It works, but its light is dim and short-lived. The quirky tidbit here, the wonderfully human detail, is the material that finally gave both men, and eventually Edison, the commercial victory. A longer-lasting filament, bamboo, specifically, a particular species of bamboo from Japan. Edison's team tested over 6,000 different plant materials: bay wood, boxwood, hickory, cedar, flax before a lucky break. One of his researchers remembered a bamboo fishing rod he'd once owned, and its peculiar strength. They sourced samples, carbonized them, and the filament lasted for over 1,200 hours. It was a miracle. The light was a warm, gentle, amber glow, a world away from the blue-white violence of the arc light. It was a light you could read by, eat by, and live under without feeling like you were being interrogated. This is where the myth of the lone inventor completely falls apart, and the ruthless businessman takes over. Edison, the master marketer, understood that the bulb was just one component of a system. He developed the parallel circuit, the durable generator, the underground conductors, the sockets, and the meters. He was selling a complete package, light as a service. When Swan began installing his bulbs in homes and theaters in England, Edison sued him for patent infringement. The legal battles were fierce and expensive. The resolution wasn't a court victory, but a corporate merger. In 1883, they formed the Edison and Swan United Electric Light Company, conveniently known as Ediswan. It was a pragmatic, if awkward, peace treaty. Historians still argue whether Edison's greatest contribution was the light bulb itself, which he absolutely did not single-handedly invent, or his unparalleled genius for creating the entire ecosystem that made electric lighting a viable commercial reality. Was he an inventor or the world's most successful systems integrator? The impact on street lighting was slower, but inevitable. The first electric streetlights were often incandescent bulbs, arranged in clusters to replace a single gas lamp. They were cleaner, safer, no open flame, no noxious gas leaks, and could be turned on and off instantly from a central switch, rendering the lamplighter's profession obsolete almost overnight. The quality of the light was a revelation. It was steady. It didn't flicker. It didn't smell. For the first time, the light on the street could be the same as the light in your parlor. The night was becoming domesticated, tamed not by a roaring public inferno, but by a million gentle, private glows, all connected to a single, humming grid. The battle was no longer about creating light, but about standardizing it, shaping it, and deciding what it should look like. The focus shifted from the bulb inside the glass to the iron and steel that held it aloft, giving form to the electric night. The gentle, warm glow of the incandescent bulb is now a settled fact of the night, a small, contained sun in a glass egg. But this new kind of light demanded a new kind of throne. You couldn't just screw this marvel of the age into the old, soot-stained gas bracket. That would be like putting a jet engine on a horse cart. The light bulb was a celebrity, and it needed a stage. And so, as the 19th century bled into the 20th, the streetlight post itself stepped into the spotlight. Its evolution is a silent history of changing tastes, engineering pragmatism, and the slow shift from seeing the street as a place of civic pride to a place of pure, efficient utility. You are no longer looking at the light itself, but at the sculpted iron and steel arm that holds it aloft. In the beginning, in the giddy early days of electric light, the posts were statements. They were celebrations. Cities commissioned designs that were breathtakingly ornate, each one a unique piece of public art. You'd walk down a boulevard and see posts fashioned like twisted barley sugar columns, adorned with intricate floral motifs, crowned with elaborate scrollwork and acanthus leaves. Some were topped with fantastical creatures, griffins, or dragons clutching the light globes in their mouths. Others took the form of classical goddesses, their upstretched hands, offering the gift of illumination to the city. The materials were heavy, expensive cast iron, poured into intricate molds. These posts weren't just functional, they were declarations. They said, "Our city is modern, prosperous, and cultured. Our very light is beautiful." The light they cast was a warm pool that danced over these artistic details, creating a play of shadow and light on the sidewalk below. The night street was an art gallery, but art is expensive and heavy and a nightmare to maintain. As the demand for street lighting exploded, covering not just main boulevards but every residential side street, the need for standardization and cost-cutting became irresistible. The ornate gave way to the pragmatic, the quirky. Wonderfully specific tidbit from this era is the invention of the post-pounder, a terrifyingly simple machine that did exactly what its name suggests. Instead of teams of men digging deep holes for heavy cast iron bases, this device would simply hammer a pre-pointed steel tube directly into the ground. It was fast, cheap, and brutally efficient. The material of choice became steel, not cast iron. It was lighter, stronger, and could be mass-produced by the thousands in identical, boring sections. This led to the reign of the Cuisinart post, the iconic mid-20th century streetlight that you probably still see in older suburbs and parking lots today. The name says it all. It looks like a mix between a cooking appliance and a golf club. It's a simple, round, tapered steel pole, topped with a bland, functional, downward curving arm and a boxy luminaire housing. There are no flourishes, no artistry. It is pure, unadulterated function. Its design philosophy is hold this light bulb at this height, nothing more. The color is almost always a dull, battleship gray or a depressing shade of municipal green. This was lighting for the age of the automobile, designed to be seen at 30 miles per hour, not admired by a leisurely pedestrian. The light itself changed too, becoming a harsh, efficient downward wash to light the road for cars, often spilling over into bedroom windows and blotting out the sky, a trade-off nobody really stopped to consider. Historians still argue whether this shift from ornate to utilitarian design was a purely economic decision, a necessary side effect of democratizing light for every street, or if it reflected a deeper philosophical change, a move away from the ornate, human-scaled 19th century and towards the stark, machine-age modernism of the 20th. Was it about saving money, or was it about a new belief that public infrastructure should be invisible, not decorative? The debate is etched into the very metal of our cities. You can still find the old ornate posts in historic districts, lovingly preserved, their curves and leaves telling a story of a different relationship with the night. And you are surrounded by the Cuisinart posts, the workhorses of illumination, telling a story of efficiency, scale, and perhaps a certain loss of civic romance. The light had been perfected, but the vessel that held it had been stripped of its soul. And just as this functional design had conquered the world, the light within it was about to change again, not in quality or shape, but in color. The world was about to be bathed in a sickly, monochromatic orange. The reign of the utilitarian Cuisinart post was absolute. Its dull gray steel had become the unquestioned skeleton of the nocturnal city, a forest of pure function holding aloft the warm, familiar glow of the incandescent bulb. It was a settled system, a solved problem. But progress is rarely satisfied with solved. A new pressure was building, one that had nothing to do with aesthetics or civic pride and everything to do with cold, hard cash and a growing global anxiety. The 1970s are dawning, and the world is gripped by an energy crisis. Gas lines stretch for blocks. The cost of electricity is soaring. Suddenly, the warm, welcoming glow of the incandescent bulb isn't just old-fashioned. It's seen as decadent, wasteful, almost unpatriotic. The night itself needs to go on a diet. And so, you witness the great orange takeover, a silent, sweeping invasion that would redefine the color of the modern night for decades. You're standing on the same street, but the world has been washed in a single, sickly hue. It's the color of a faded bruise, of overcooked pumpkin, of a perpetual, foggy sunset. This is the light of the high-pressure sodium vapor lamp, and its victory was won on a single, undeniable battlefield: efficiency. Where a standard incandescent bulb wasted about 90% of its energy as heat, the sodium lamp was a miserly miracle of physics. It works by sending an electric arc through a vapor of ionized sodium, which then glows with an intense, almost monochromatic light. The result is an astonishing amount of lumens per watt. For a city government staring at a skyrocketing utility bill, it was a no-brainer. They could replace a 200-watt incandescent with a 100-watt sodium lamp and get more light for half the cost. The switch was rapid and total. The warm white light that had defined electric streets for nearly a century was systematically purged, replaced by this alien, orange glow. The effect was disorienting. The world under sodium light is a lie. It's a monochrome movie. Colors are annihilated. A vibrant red car parked under this light becomes a murky brown. Lush green hedges turn a dead, grayish black. Your own skin takes on a waxy, jaundiced pallor. Everyone looks slightly ill. The quirky, almost philosophical tidbit of this era is the sheer psychological strangeness it introduced. The world lost its visual depth and texture. It became harder to read expressions, to distinguish details, to feel connected to your environment. The night became a flat, orange stage set. It was safer, perhaps, in the sense that it was brighter and cheaper, but it was also profoundly alienating. It created a permanent, eerie twilight, a world that felt both hypervisible and utterly distorted. It was the visual equivalent of eating nutrient paste. It kept you alive, but it stripped away all the joy. This wasn't just an aesthetic loss, it was a sensory one. The old incandescent lights had a softness, a gentle fade at the edges of their pools of light that felt natural, like firelight. The sodium vapor lamp had a hard, chemical edge. Its light didn't feel warm, it felt clinical, and it came with its own unique soundtrack. Each lamp was fitted with a heavy, magnetic ballast to regulate the current, and these ballasts hummed, not a gentle hum, but a low, persistent, 60-cycle hertz drone that became the bass note of the suburban night. If you lived near one, that sound would seep into your dreams, a constant, mechanical reminder of the efficiency happening just outside your window. The night was no longer silent, it was buzzing with cost-saving measures. Historians still argue whether the wholesale adoption of sodium vapor lighting was a necessary, pragmatic response to a genuine energy emergency, or a catastrophic failure of urban planning that prioritized short-term savings over long-term human experience and environmental well-being. Was it a responsible choice, or did it create a world that was, in its own way, more depressing and less safe because it felt so unnatural and unwelcoming? The debate is tinged with orange. For a generation, this was simply what night was. It wasn't black, it was orange. It created a cultural memory of a specific, artificial melancholy, captured in countless films and photographs of rain-slicked streets under that sickly glow. It was the light of empty bus stops, of all-night diners, of industrial parks. It was efficient, undeniable, and utterly devoid of soul. It was the perfect light for an age of austerity. But humanity's spirit always yearns for something more. A correction was inevitable. The pendulum was about to swing back, not towards the warm, wasteful glow of the past, but towards something colder, sharper, and more complex than anyone could have imagined. That pervasive, humming orange glow of the sodium vapor lamp promised one thing above all else: safety. It was the visual embodiment of a simple, seemingly unassailable equation that had been sold to the public for over a century. Light equals safety, darkness equals danger. It was a logic so straightforward it felt innate. More light means fewer shadows for criminals to hide in. More light means better visibility for citizens to see threats and for police to patrol. More light creates a perception of order, discouraging mischief and mayhem. Cities across the world bought this premise wholesale, pouring money into brighter and brighter lighting schemes for their parks, parking garages, and alleyways. But as the 20th century wore on, a quiet, complicating question began to emerge from the long, orange-tinted shadows. Was it actually true? You are about to step into the safety paradox, a debate that challenges one of the most deeply held beliefs about our modern world. The intuitive argument feels rock solid. Of course a well-lit street is safer than a dark one. We feel it in our bones. Our pulse slows, our shoulders relax. We might even whistle a tune under the friendly glow of a street lamp that we'd never dare utter in a pitch-black lane. This feeling isn't nothing. It's called perceived safety, and it has real value. It encourages people to go out at night, to use public spaces, to be customers at restaurants and theaters. A city that feels safe is a city that thrives after sunset, and there is some evidence to back the feeling. Studies have shown that improved lighting can reduce certain types of crime, like petty theft and vandalism, often simply because it increases what criminologists call natural surveillance, the idea that, with better light, more people are around to see what's happening, and criminals don't like witnesses. But the picture gets murkier when you look at more serious, violent crime. Does a brighter light really stop a mugging or an assault? The evidence is frustratingly mixed. And that's where the paradox takes root. Some comprehensive studies have found that while lighting might change where crime happens, it doesn't necessarily reduce the overall amount. This is the concept of displacement. A criminal looking to break into a car isn't going to just give up and go home because a new light is installed. They'll just move to the next dark street over, or to a different parking lot that hasn't been upgraded yet. The crime isn't prevented, it's just relocated. You haven't solved the problem. You've just passed it on to your less well-lit neighbors. In some perverse cases, better lighting might even help criminals by giving them a well-lit view of what they're doing, allowing them to better assess their targets and escape routes. Now for the quirky, unsettling tidbit that perfectly illustrates this confusion. In the 1990s, the city of Glasgow, Scotland, conducted a massive study, installing improved lighting in several housing estates. The results were dramatic. Crime rates, including violent crime, plummeted. Case closed, right? Light equals safety. But wait, around the same time, the city of Birmingham, England, did the exact same thing. The results? No statistically significant change in crime rates whatsoever. So what gives? The answer lies in the details the simple equation ignores. In Glasgow, the new lighting was part of a broader package of urban renewal that included better housing, management, increased community engagement, and a general sense of investment and care. The lighting was a symbol of that change. In Birmingham, it was just new lights. The lesson is that lighting doesn't operate in a vacuum. Its effect is tied to everything else around it: social cohesion, economic factors, police presence. A light in a neglected, disenfranchised community might just be a light. A light in a community that feels seen and invested in can be a catalyst for real change. Historians still argue whether the massive public investment in street lighting over the centuries was driven by a genuine evidence-based desire to reduce crime or by a more psychological, political need to reassure a fearful public and project an image of control and modernity regardless of the actual efficacy. Was it about safety, or was it about the theater of safety? The bright, unwavering electric light is a powerful symbol of human rationality triumphing over the chaotic, dangerous dark. It makes us feel like we're in control. But the reality of crime is far more complex and stubborn than a simple switch can fix. The light can expose a criminal, but it can't address the poverty, desperation, or social breakdown that might have created him. We bought the orange glow because it offered a simple solution to a terrifyingly complex problem. And while we were busy watching the illuminated streets, we failed to notice the unintended consequences of our all-night world creeping in from the edges of town, from the forests and the fields, and from the sky above. Our war on darkness was starting to have collateral damage. That pervasive, humming orange glow of the sodium vapor lamp promised one thing above all else: safety. It was the visual embodiment of a simple, seemingly unassailable equation that had been sold to the public for over a century. Light equals safety, darkness equals danger. It was a logic so straightforward it felt innate. More light means fewer shadows for criminals to hide in. More light means better visibility for citizens to see threats and for police to patrol. More light creates a perception of order, discouraging mischief and mayhem. Cities across the world bought this premise wholesale, pouring money into brighter and brighter lighting schemes for their parks, parking garages, and alleyways. But as the 20th century wore on, a quiet, complicating question began to emerge from the long, orange-tinted shadows. Was it actually true? You are about to step into the safety paradox, a debate that challenges one of the most deeply held beliefs about our modern world. The intuitive argument feels rock solid. Of course a well-lit street is safer than a dark one. We feel it in our bones. Our pulse slows, our shoulders relax. We might even whistle a tune under the friendly glow of a street lamp that we never dare utter in a pitch-black lane. This feeling isn't nothing. It's called perceived safety, and it has real value. It encourages people to go out at night, to use public spaces, to be customers at restaurants and theaters. A city that feels safe is a city that thrives after sunset, and there is some evidence to back the feeling. Studies have shown that improved lighting can reduce certain types of crime, like petty theft and vandalism, often simply because it increases what criminologists call natural surveillance, the idea that, with better light, more people are around to see what's happening, and criminals don't like witnesses. But the picture gets murkier when you look at more serious, violent crime. Does a brighter light really stop a mugging or an assault? The evidence is frustratingly mixed, and that's where the paradox takes root. Some comprehensive studies have found that while lighting might change where crime happens, it doesn't necessarily reduce the overall amount. This is the concept of displacement. A criminal looking to break into a car isn't going to just give up and go home because a new light is installed. They'll just move to the next dark street over, or to a different parking lot that hasn't been upgraded yet. The crime isn't prevented, it's just relocated. You haven't solved the problem. You've just passed it on to your less well-lit neighbors. In some perverse cases, better lighting might even help criminals by giving them a well-lit view of what they're doing, allowing them to better assess their targets and escape routes. Now for the quirky, unsettling tidbit that perfectly illustrates this confusion. In the 1990s, the city of Glasgow, Scotland, conducted a massive study, installing improved lighting in several housing estates. The results were dramatic. Crime rates, including violent crime, plummeted. Case closed, right? Light equals safety. But wait, around the same time, the city of Birmingham, England, did the exact same thing. The results? No statistically significant change in crime rates whatsoever. So what gives? The answer lies in the details the simple equation ignores. In Glasgow, the new lighting was part of a broader package of urban renewal that included better housing, management, increased community engagement, and a general sense of investment and care. The lighting was a symbol of that change. In Birmingham, it was just new lights. The lesson is that lighting doesn't operate in a vacuum. Its effect is tied to everything else around it: social cohesion, economic factors, police presence. A light in a neglected, disenfranchised community might just be a light. A light in a community that feels seen and invested in can be a catalyst for real change. Historians still argue whether the massive public investment in street lighting over the centuries was driven by a genuine evidence-based desire to reduce crime or by a more psychological political need to reassure a fearful public and project an image of control and modernity regardless of the actual efficacy. Was it about safety, or was it about the theater of safety? The bright, unwavering electric light is a powerful symbol of human rationality triumphing over the chaotic, dangerous dark. It makes us feel like we're in control. But the reality of crime is far more complex and stubborn than a simple switch can fix. The light can expose a criminal, but it can't address the poverty, desperation, or social breakdown that might have created him. We bought the orange glow because it offered a simple solution to a terrifyingly complex problem. And while we were busy watching the illuminated streets, we failed to notice the unintended consequences of our all-night world creeping in from the edges of town, from the forests and the fields, and from the sky above. Our war on darkness was starting to have collateral damage. For centuries, our battle against the night has been a profoundly human-centric story. It was about our safety, our commerce, our fear of the dark, our desire to extend the day. We never stopped to consider that we weren't the only actors on this stage. The world, we assumed, was ours to illuminate as we saw fit. But as that orange sodium glow spread like a fever across the globe, its consequences began to ripple outward, far beyond the city limits, into ecosystems that had evolved over millions of years to depend on the sacred, predictable rhythm of light and dark. Our war on darkness had innocent bystanders, and the collateral damage is only now becoming clear. You are about to step away from the sidewalk and into the wider environmental cost of our illuminated empire. The most heartbreaking example is also the most poetic. On a moonless night, a baby sea turtle hatches from its nest deep in the sand of a Florida beach. Its instinct, honed over millennia, is simple: find the light. The natural world has provided a perfect guide. The horizon over the ocean is always slightly brighter than the dark dunes behind the beach. The shimmering reflection of the moon and stars on the water creates a gentle glow, a beacon leading the tiny hatchling to its aquatic home. But now, there is a new, far brighter glow behind the dunes. It's the parking lot lights of a beachfront hotel, the streetlights of a coastal road, the neon sign of a seafood restaurant. The hatchling turns its back on the ocean and begins to trudge, with all its tiny strength, inland. It will crawl until it is crushed on a road, baked by the morning sun on a hot parking lot, or taken by a predator. For this ancient, instinctual ritual, our light is a siren song leading to death. This isn't a rare tragedy. It's a mass casualty event happening on countless beaches every single year. But the disruption goes far deeper than this poignant image. Our artificial light is a brutal, across-the-board disruptor of circadian rhythms, the internal biological clocks that govern nearly all life. For migrating birds, the night sky is a map. They navigate by the stars, undertaking journeys of thousands of miles with pinpoint accuracy. Our cities have become deadly traps for them. The glow of urban areas, known as sky glow, creates a dome of light that obscures the stars. Birds become disoriented, circling in exhaustion around brightly lit skyscrapers, communication towers, and floodlit monuments. Millions die every year from collisions with glass they cannot see, or from sheer fatigue, their internal compasses scrambled by our endless day. For insects, it's an even more direct catastrophe. The quirky, devastating tidbit here is the phenomenon of a fixed action pattern gone horribly wrong. Many insects don't navigate by the moon. They navigate by keeping the moon at a constant angle to their body. It's a brilliant system for traveling in a straight line, until they mistake a street lamp for the moon. The lamp is not millions of miles away, it's a few feet. To keep this moon at a constant angle, they must fly in a never-ending, tightening spiral until they either burn themselves on the bulb or drop from exhaustion. Our streetlights have become mass insect traps, decimating populations of moths, beetles, and other crucial pollinators and food sources, with cascading effects up the entire food chain. Even the animals that seem to adapt are suffering. Predators use the light to their advantage. Spinners build webs directly on the glass of streetlights, feasting on the trapped insects. Bats flock to the buffets we unintentionally provide. But this creates an unnatural concentration, altering feeding patterns and putting pressure on specific insect species. Prey animals, in turn, lose the protective cover of darkness. The entire nocturnal ecosystem is thrown into a state of chronic stress and imbalance. Historians and ecologists still argue whether the impact of light pollution is a secondary environmental stressor, compounding issues like habitat loss and climate change, or if it is a primary driver of ecological collapse in its own right, particularly for specialized nocturnal species. Is it the final straw, or is it the entire bale? The debate is urgent, because the problem is invisible to most of us. We look up at our orange sky and see safety and progress. A migrating songbird looks up and sees a featureless, blinding void. A sea turtle sees a false dawn. A moth sees a fatal, spiraling obsession. We built this world of light for ourselves, never imagining we were building a labyrinth of traps for everything else. And as if the ecological cost weren't enough, our victory over the night has also meant a profound loss for us, a severing of a connection that defined the entirety of human existence. Until a mere century ago, we have, in our quest to banish the dark, also banished the stars. This loss is felt most acutely by a small group of people who have made it their life's work to look up, and who now find their view of the universe slowly being erased, not by clouds, but by the collective glow of every poorly aimed porch light and parking lot lamp. Their lament is the next chapter in this story of unintended consequences, that profound sense of loss. The severing of a connection that once guided explorers and inspired poets is felt nowhere more acutely than by those who have dedicated their lives to looking up. While the rest of us might occasionally miss the stars, for astronomers, our victory over the night is nothing short of an existential crisis. Their lament is not a whisper, it is a growing, desperate plea against the dying of the light, the real light, the ancient light from the cosmos. You are now standing on the observing deck of a great modern telescope, a monument of human ingenuity perched on a remote mountaintop, and you are witnessing the slow, inexorable fade of the universe itself, not because the stars are going out, but because we have chosen to drown them in our own terrestrial glare. For thousands of years, the prime enemy of the astronomer was the weather. Clouds, fog, atmospheric turbulence, these were the obstacles between them and the heavens. The solution was simple. Build your observatory on a high, dry, remote mountain where the air is thin and stable, and the skies are clear more than 300 nights a year. Places like Mount Wilson in California, Kitt Peak in Arizona, or Mauna Kea in Hawaii became the cathedrals of cosmic discovery. But they chose these locations a century ago, when the nearest city was a small, dim cluster of lights dozens of miles away. They couldn't have predicted the cancerous growth of urban sprawl, the explosion of suburban lighting, and the invention of the brutally efficient LED. Now, that same dry, clear air that provides such stunning views of the cosmos also acts as a perfect canvas, upon which our cities paint a perpetual, glowing dome of wasted light. This is sky glow, and it is the astronomer's nemesis. The impact is not romantic, it is brutally technical. Modern astronomy relies on capturing the faintest whispers of light from the edge of space and time. It's about collecting photons that have been traveling for billions of years to finally hit the precisely polished mirror of a telescope. The value of an observation is measured in the signal-to-noise ratio. The light from a distant galaxy is the signal. The light from a poorly aimed street lamp 50 miles away scattered by the atmosphere into the telescope, is the noise. We are quite literally drowning the music of the spheres in our own visual static. It is like trying to hear a pin drop in the front row of a heavy metal concert. Certain types of observations, particularly the spectroscopy, that allows us to analyze the composition of distant stars and galaxies, are becoming impossible from all but the most remote locations on Earth. The faint, specific chemical signatures in the light are simply washed out, erased by the bland, white glare of a car dealership's all-night lot. The quirky, deeply ironic tidbit in this story involves one of the most famous observatories of all, Mount Wilson, where Edwin Hubble first discovered the expansion of the universe. It sits overlooking the Los Angeles basin. In Hubble's day, the light pollution was manageable. Today, the glow from Greater Los Angeles renders the mighty 100-inch Hooker telescope, once the largest in the world, practically useless for cutting-edge research. It's now mostly used for educational purposes and history tours, a monument to discovery, made obsolete by the very civilization it helped enlighten. The great telescopes are now being built in the last remaining patches of true darkness. On the planet, the high deserts of Chile, the icy wastes of Antarctica, and even those are under threat as satellite megaconstellations, like SpaceX's Starlink, begin to streak through long-exposure images, creating a new kind of celestial pollution. Historians and scientists still argue whether the primary metric for measuring light pollution as damage should be the outright loss of visible stars to the naked eye, a profound cultural and psychological loss, or the more technical, but ultimately more critical, degradation of scientific data from multi-billion-dollar research facilities. Is the greater tragedy that a child in a city may never see the Milky Way, or that a cosmologist may never decipher the secrets of a newly found quasar? The debate is charged because it pits public sentiment against hard science, though both are victims of the same profligate waste of light. The astronomer's lament is the canary in the coal mine, a highly specialized warning of a much broader sensory deprivation affecting us all. We have traded the infinite, awe-inspiring grandeur of the universe for the right to see the pavement clearly at 2 a.m. It's a bargain whose true cost we are only beginning to calculate. But the story doesn't end with lament. The very technology that created this problem, the relentless march of lighting efficiency, is now offering a paradoxical solution. The same lead revolution that threatened to bleach the night with cold, blue-white light is also, in the hands of a new generation of designers, becoming the key to taking it back. The answer isn't to plunge ourselves into darkness, but to finally, after centuries of clumsy effort, learn how to be intelligent with our light. The next chapter isn't about more light, it's about better light, and the dawn of a new, more thoughtful relationship with the night. That profound sense of loss, the severing of a connection that once guided explorers and inspired poets, is felt nowhere more acutely than by those who have dedicated their lives to looking up. While the rest of us might occasionally miss the stars, for astronomers, our victory over the night is nothing short of an existential crisis. Their lament is not a whisper, it is a growing, desperate plea against the dying of the light, the real light, the ancient light from the cosmos. You are now standing on the observing deck of a great modern telescope, a monument of human ingenuity perched on a remote mountaintop, and you are witnessing the slow, inexorable fade of the universe itself, not because the stars are going out, but because we have chosen to drown them in our own terrestrial glare. For thousands of years, the prime enemy of the astronomer was the weather. Clouds, fog, atmospheric turbulence, these were the obstacles between them and the heavens. The solution was simple. Build your observatory on a high, dry, remote mountain where the air is thin and stable, and the skies are clear more than 300 nights a year. Places like Mount Wilson in California, Kitt Peak in Arizona, or Mauna Kea in Hawaii became the cathedrals of cosmic discovery. But they chose these locations a century ago, when the nearest city was a small, dim cluster of lights dozens of miles away. They couldn't have predicted the cancerous growth of urban sprawl, the explosion of suburban lighting, and the invention of the brutally efficient LED. Now, that same dry, clear air that provides such stunning views of the cosmos also acts as a perfect canvas, upon which our cities paint a perpetual, glowing dome of wasted light. This is sky glow, and it is the astronomer's nemesis. The impact is not romantic, it is brutally technical. Modern astronomy relies on capturing the faintest whispers of light from the edge of space and time. It's about collecting photons that have been traveling for billions of years to finally hit the precisely polished mirror of a telescope. The value of an observation is measured in the signal-to-noise ratio. The light from a distant galaxy is the signal, The light from a poorly aimed street lamp 50 miles away, scattered by the atmosphere into the telescope, is the noise. We are quite literally drowning the music of the spheres in our own visual static. It is like trying to hear a pin drop in the front row of a heavy metal concert. Certain types of observations, particularly the spectroscopy, that allows us to analyze the composition of distant stars and galaxies, are becoming impossible from all but the most remote locations on Earth. The faint, specific chemical signatures in the light are simply washed out, erased by the bland, white glare of a car dealership's all-night lot. The quirky, deeply ironic tidbit in this story involves one of the most famous observatories of all, Mount Wilson, where Edwin Hubble first discovered the expansion of the universe. It sits overlooking the Los Angeles basin. In Hubble's day, the light pollution was manageable. Today, the glow from Greater Los Angeles renders the mighty 100-inch Hooker telescope, once the largest in the world, practically useless for cutting-edge research. It's now mostly used for educational purposes and history tours, a monument to discovery, made obsolete by the very civilization it helped enlighten. The great telescopes are now being built in the last remaining patches of true darkness, on the planet, the high deserts of Chile, the icy wastes of Antarctica, and even those are under threat as satellite megaconstellations, like SpaceX's Starlink, begin to streak through long-exposure images, creating a new kind of celestial pollution. Historians and scientists still argue whether the primary metric for measuring light pollution as damage should be the outright loss of visible stars to the naked eye, a profound cultural and psychological loss, or the more technical, but ultimately more critical, degradation of scientific data from multi-billion-dollar research facilities. Is the greater tragedy that a child in a city may never see the Milky Way, or that a cosmologist may never decipher the secrets of a newly found quasar? The debate is charged because it pits public sentiment against hard science, though both are victims of the same profligate waste of light. The astronomer's lament is the canary in the coal mine, a highly specialized warning of a much broader sensory deprivation affecting us all. We have traded the infinite, awe-inspiring grandeur of the universe for the right to see the pavement clearly at 2 a.m. It's a bargain whose true cost we are only beginning to calculate. But the story doesn't end with lament. The very technology that created this problem, the relentless march of lighting efficiency, is now offering a paradoxical solution. The same lead revolution that threatened to bleach the night with cold, blue-white light is also, in the hands of a new generation of designers, becoming the key to taking it back. The answer isn't to plunge ourselves into darkness, but to finally, after centuries of clumsy effort, learn how to be intelligent with our light. The next chapter isn't about more light, it's about better light, and the dawn of a new, more thoughtful relationship with the night. The debate over the harsh, sleep-stealing glow of blue-rich LEDs is still raging in city councils and bedrooms, a very human problem of biology clashing with budgets. But even as we argue about the color of our light, a far more profound transformation is occurring right under our noses, one that changes the very nature of the object we've been tracing for millennia. The humble streetlight post, for centuries a passive piece of metal, is waking up. It is becoming a data point, a sentinel, a node in a vast, invisible network. You are now entering the smart light era, where illumination is no longer the primary function, but merely one feature in a suite of capabilities that promise unprecedented efficiency and whisper of unprecedented control. The question is no longer just how bright, but how smart, and, more importantly, who is watching. Imagine a streetlight that does more than just turn on at dusk. It's equipped with a motion sensor. As you walk down the deserted street at night, it brightens ahead of you, creating a moving pool of safety, and then dims behind you to save energy. It's a beautiful, efficient, almost magical experience. Now imagine that same streetlight is also equipped with a high-resolution camera and a microphone. That same motion sensor triggers not just the light, but the recording of your journey. Your face is captured. Your conversation snippets are logged and analyzed by algorithms trained to detect suspicious behavior or keywords. The warm, welcoming light that guides your way is also the cold, unblinking eye of a panopticon. This is the central dilemma of the smart city. The same infrastructure that can protect and serve can also surveil and control. The potential benefits are enormous, and they're being sold hard by technology companies. Smart lights can dim dynamically based on real-time need, slashing energy use far beyond what even the most efficient dumb LED can achieve. They can monitor air quality, measuring pollution levels on every corner. They can host public Wi-Fi, act as emergency sirens, and provide a power source for charging electric vehicles. In a disaster, they could guide emergency services with pulsating light patterns. They can even detect gunshots, triangulate their location, and alert police within seconds. This is the promise, a hyper-efficient, hyper-aware, and hyper-safe urban environment. But the quirky and deeply concerning tidbit of this new era is the business model. Cities, often cash-strapped, are being offered these systems not for outright purchase, but as a service. A company will install thousands of these smart poles for free, in exchange for a long-term contract and access to the data they collect. Your municipality might not own its own lighting infrastructure anymore. It might just be leasing it from a private tech corporation that now has a direct feed from every street corner. What happens to that data? Who owns it? How is it used? Could it be sold to advertisers to track consumer behavior, or to insurance companies to adjust premiums based on how often you take late-night walks? The streetlight, once a symbol of public good, risks becoming a privatized spy. Historians still argue whether this technological leap represents the final logical step in humanity's millennia-long quest to tame the night for collective safety and convenience, or if it is a fundamental perversion of that quest, shifting the goal from public welfare to data harvesting and social control. Is it the culmination of the Romans' dream of a safe, orderly street, or is it the realization of every dystopian novelist's nightmare? The debate is urgent because the infrastructure is being installed now, often with little public debate, hidden in the fine print of municipal budgeting under the bland heading of efficiency upgrades, and so we find ourselves at a curious juncture. After centuries of striving for more light, brighter light, constant light, a counter-movement is quietly growing. It's not a call to return to the dangerous dark ages, but a plea for a new philosophy, responsible lighting. It's the idea that the ultimate sign of sophistication isn't banishing the night, but learning to live with it in harmony. The future might not be brighter, it might be darker, and that might be a very good thing indeed. It might be a future where light is dynamic, responsive, and respectful, where it knows when to shine, and, just as importantly, when to turn itself off, allowing a bit of the natural, starry night to return. Our long journey from the sputtering olive oil lamp of ancient Rome might finally be circling back to a place of balance where we can once again look up and truly see the universe while still feeling safe on the ground beneath our feet. The gentle hum of the smart city fades, not into silence, but into a softer, more natural soundscape. The frantic need to document, to analyze, to illuminate every last corner of the world finally exhausts itself, and a calm settles over the narrative of light. You've traveled a long road, from the fearful, smoky flames of the ancient world to the blinding, data-hungry glare of the modern one. It has been a story of fear, of ambition, of incredible ingenuity, and of profound unintended consequences. But here, at the end, the story softens its edges, slows its pace, and allows for a different thought to emerge. Perhaps the final, most sophisticated stage in our relationship with the night isn't about winning the war against darkness, but about signing a peace treaty. Imagine a light that knows its place, a gentle amber glow that guides your path without assaulting your senses, that respects the hour and the need for rest, that turns its face downward to do its job, without splashing wastefully into the sky to drown out the stars. Imagine a light that is on when you need it, and off when you don't, preserving the sacred rhythm of day and night that all life, including our own, evolved to expect. This isn't a step backward, it's a step forward into wisdom. It's the understanding that true safety isn't found in a blinding sterile noon at midnight, but in a gentle confident luminance that allows the shadows to exist, that allows the world to sleep, that allows the cosmos to perform its ancient silent show overhead. So let that thought be the final one to carry you into your own rest. The journey is over. The lights, both outside your window and inside your mind, are now dimming. The night is not your enemy. It is a blanket, a respite, a natural and necessary part of the great cycle. Let it in. Feel its quiet embrace. There is nothing more to solve, nothing more to fear, just the gentle, steady rhythm of your own breath, in and out, sensing with the slow turn of the world away from the sun, and into the soft, welcoming dark. Let go. And sleep.